Hi, welcome to Fun Science with Rohini. Today's experiment is about Louis Pasteur proposing the germ theory of disease. And this germ theory proved once and for all that it is invisible microorganisms that cause diseases and not just air that is flowing around. Uh, in olden days or ancient times, spontaneous generation was a theory that was very strongly believed in. In the spontaneous generation, it says that parents are not needed, eggs and spores are not needed. Life emerges just like that out of inorganic things, out of non living things. And they said, if you put cheese or soiled cloth or things like that for a long enough time, rats would come out of it. And dead and decaying meat had maggots coming out of it and insects coming out of it. So people thought that life generates spontaneously by itself without spores, eggs, or parents from non living or inorganic matter. Louis Pasteur never believed in spontaneous generation, and in spontaneous generation, one more idea was that bad odors. Suppose you are walking on a road and there is a dead animal somewhere close by, let us say at a distance of 500 or 600 meters, and then you get that bad stink. They said that breathing that stinky air, miasma, is what causes diseases. And Louis Pasteur said air by itself cannot cause diseases. There is something in the air, particles, let it be dust particles itself, that is what causes diseases. And not air just by itself. Foul smelling air doesn't cause diseases. But if foul smelling air also carries some particles in it, invisible microscopic particles in it, and those are the things that get into your system, that is when you get diseases. Now there was a lot of argument on the spontaneous generation and the germ theory and all that, and at one point of time a reward was also announced for designing an experiment which proved once and for all either of the theories. Now many people came up with the experiments back then, but the definitive experiment which proved once and for all that air by itself doesn't cause diseases, but particles in the air are the things that cause diseases, was given by Louis Pasteur. And the way he showed this experiment was he took a swan-necked flask. Swan-necked is, you can see the long curved neck like a swan's neck. And the purpose of taking this flask is the air that enters through this, through the mouth of this neck is caught here in the neck, is caught in the curve of the neck. It is not sent all the way into the bottle. It is trapped in the neck and it doesn't enter the flask as such. So what he did, he took broth, he took a source of growth of organisms, broth. We call it nutrient broth. Let us assume it is nutrient broth. He took that and he filled the flask till the halfway mark. And then this flask with the broth, he sterilized. He sterilized by heating it. And he heated it to such an extent that all the existing spores or existing microorganisms or existing disease-causing particles would have died. And the air above it is also heated up enough to remove all the particles that could have been in it. And then he left this flask lying like that for a few days. And then he noticed that the broth was clear and no organisms developed, because, as he said, air by itself is pure. Air by itself is pure, and even if some dust particles are carried in the air that is coming in from outside, they are trapped in the neck of the swan-necked flask and they cannot enter the broth. So therefore, the broth doesn't show any growth or any microorganisms. This is the first set of experiment he conducted, and then in the same experiment, in the same way, he designed one more, wherein he sterilized. He sterilized the broth, and everything was as the previous experiment. The air was pure because it was also sterilized. The broth was also sterilized, heated up in such a way that the microorganisms would have died. And the long-necked flask was there. But in this set, he broke the long-necked flask. He broke it. So when he broke it, the little opening that is here will allow air from outside to come in. He broke it such that the air coming in from outside, not the air that is sterilized here, the air present in the flask, but after he broke it, air from outside enters this, and along with it, it brings the dust particles and all. And as you can see here, there is growth of microbes, microorganisms. With this, again, he said that air by itself is pure, but when air is bringing in dust particles along with it, it leads to growth of microorganisms, which are the cause of diseases. And then he repeated the experiment with another set, wherein he sterilized the flask, just like the first experiment. The broth was sterile, that is, the broth was rid of all the microorganisms, dust particles, spores, everything, and the air above was also rid of everything. The air above is also pure. Now he tilted this flask. He tilted this flask in such a way that after a while, he tilted the flask in such a way that the dust particles that are trapped in the neck, the dust particles that enter the flask from outside and those that are trapped in the neck, can touch the broth. He tilted it in such a way and left it like this for some time, such that this broth can touch the dust particles caught in the neck. And even when this was there, the microorganisms appeared, proving that it is the dust particles that are caught in the neck is what is causing the growth of microorganisms. And it is not spontaneous generation. It is dust and particles that are coming in from the air, carrying spores and carrying all those things that cause diseases are the ones. All the dust particles are the ones that lead to the growth of microorganisms, and these microorganisms will be the ones to cause diseases. This was one of the final experiments he did in proving his germ theory. But he began his experiments by observing wine turning sour, and he said that there is yeast which actually ferments the grapes, and the yeast is present naturally on the skin of the grapes. But when this yeast is mixed up with other microorganisms which result in the release of lactic acid, the wine turns sour. That was the beginning of his experiments on beer and wine. He started in saying that there is a contaminant in the air which is turning the wine and the beer sour instead of keeping them fresh like they have to be. And then finally, with this experiment, he proved that pure air by itself cannot cause growth of microorganisms or growth, and impurities in the air that are coming in are the ones that result in the growth of microorganisms, and the impurities carried in the form of dust and particles in the air is the one that results in diseases. This experiment proved once and for all that organisms arise from previously existing organisms, and microorganisms are the reason for diseases. Thank you.